Comanche Nation, today, a sovereign entity without a reservation. In less than 1 decade, over 30 million buffalo were slaughtered across the American plains. By 1885, fewer than 1,000 remained, a 99.99% extermination that destroyed the Comanche way of life overnight. How did the most powerful Native American empire collapse so rapidly? And how do the Comanche survive today without a traditional reservation? The answer reveals a remarkable story of adaptation against impossible odds. Subscribe to Native Legends and History Stories for more untold narratives that shaped America. The era of Comanche dominance. Throughout the 18th and 19th centuries, the Comanche people dominated the southern Great Plains, controlling an expansive territory that stretched across northwestern Texas and into portions of New Mexico, Colorado, Kansas, and Oklahoma. This vast domain, known as Comancheria, encompassed hundreds of thousands of square miles of prairie and represented one of the most formidable indigenous empires in North American history. While they didn't control 95% of what is now Texas, the Comanche were undeniably the dominant force across the Southern Plains region. At their height, around 1780, the Comanche population numbered between 20,000 and 40,000 people. Their power stemmed from unparalleled military prowess and horseback skills that made them virtually unbeatable in open combat. Comanche warriors could fire arrows with deadly accuracy while hanging from the side of a galloping horse, making them elusive targets and lethal attackers. U.S. military commanders frequently reported that no other Native American tribe inspired the same level of fear among soldiers and settlers. The Comanche way of life revolved entirely around movement with the great bison herds. Their bands migrated seasonally, following the massive buffalo populations that provided nearly everything they needed. Comanche hunters took down buffalo with remarkable efficiency, using every part of the animal: meat for sustenance, hides for teepees and clothing, bones for tools, and sinew for bowstrings. They deliberately rejected settled farming, as their nomadic culture granted them tactical flexibility and control over vast territories that no agricultural society could match. Their exceptional horsemanship originated in the 17th century, when they acquired horses from Spanish colonizers. The Comanche quickly transformed from a relatively small mountain tribe into mounted warriors who mastered equestrian skills beyond what Europeans had ever witnessed. Within Comanche society, horses weren't merely transportation, but represented wealth, status, and power. A successful warrior might own hundreds of horses, carefully bred and trained for specific purposes, from buffalo hunting to warfare. The Comanche didn't just build a military empire. They established a sophisticated trading network that became the economic hub of the Southern Plains. At trading centers like those at the headwaters of the Red River, they exchanged horses and buffalo hides for guns, metal tools, and luxury goods with other tribes, Spanish colonists, French traders, and later, American settlers. Their monopoly on horse trading gave them particular economic leverage with neighboring peoples. This complex commerce transformed Comancheria into both a military stronghold and the central marketplace of the region, where even their enemies had to engage in trade. The Comanche maintained this dominance, not through centralized government, but through a flexible social structure of independent bands, united by common language, intermarriage, and shared cultural practices. Unlike the hierarchical societies of Europe or the Eastern tribes, Comanche leadership was based on demonstrated skill and merit rather than heredity, allowing the most capable warriors and strategists to rise to positions of influence. This adaptable social organization proved perfectly suited to the harsh but resource-rich grasslands they controlled for over a century, a rapidly changing landscape. By the mid-19th century, the seemingly invincible Comanche Empire faced a perfect storm of changes that would rapidly dismantle their control of the Southern Plains. As the United States expanded westward, Texas became the focal point of a dramatic transformation in land ownership patterns that directly threatened Comanche dominance. While today Western states like Nevada and California retain significant public lands, 85% and 45% respectively, Texas followed a radically different path, with 95% of its territory ultimately becoming private property. This unusual land ownership pattern stemmed directly from policies established after Texas joined the United States in 1845. Unlike other Western territories that maintained federal ownership of vast tracts, Texas negotiated the right to retain control of its public lands as a condition of joining the Union. This unique arrangement had catastrophic consequences for the Comanche and other indigenous peoples. The Mexican-American War, 1846-1848, served as a catalyst for accelerated white settlement in Texas. The American victory opened previously contested territories to thousands of new settlers migrating from the eastern United States. These newcomers arrived with fundamentally different concepts of land use and ownership than the nomadic Comanche, where the Comanche saw open plains for buffalo hunting and seasonal migration. White settlers envisioned fenced farms and cattle ranches. Texas land law played a decisive role in this transformation. The state actively promoted private ownership by distributing land grants to individuals and corporations rather than maintaining federal reserves. In many cases, the state offered land at extremely low prices or as incentives for railroad development, spurring rapid establishment of farms and ranches across former Comanche territory. The Texas legislature systematically disregarded indigenous claims to the land, treating vast areas of Comancheria as vacant and available for settlement. Perhaps the most devastating blow to Comanche power came with the systematic destruction of the buffalo herds. Between 1870 and 1878, commercial hunters carried out an unprecedented slaughter, enabled by newly constructed railroads that provided easy access to the plains and fast transportation of hides to eastern markets. Professional buffalo hunters like J. Wright Moore killed hundreds of animals daily, often taking only the valuable hides and tongues, while leaving mountains of carcasses to rot on the prairie. The numbers are staggering. From an estimated 30 million buffalo in 1800, fewer than 1,000 remained by 1885, a 99.997% reduction that effectively destroyed the foundation of Comanche life. The U.S. military recognized this ecological destruction as a strategic weapon. General Philip Sheridan famously remarked, "Let them kill, skin, and sell until the buffalo is exterminated. Then your prairies can be covered with speckled cattle and the festive cowboy." Without buffalo, the Comanche lost not only their primary food source, but the basis of their material culture and economic trading power. Military defeat soon followed ecological collapse. The Red River War, 1874-1875, marked the final coordinated resistance of the Southern Plains tribes. In September 1874, Colonel Ranald S. Mackenzie led U.S. forces in a surprise attack on Comanche villages in Palo Duro Canyon. Rather than focusing on killing warriors, Mackenzie targeted their resource base. His troops captured and destroyed the Comanche horse herd, over 1,400 animals shot in a single day, and burned their winter food supplies and shelter materials. Without horses, food, or buffalo, the once mobile warriors became immobilized and vulnerable as winter approached. On June 2, 1875, Quanah Parker, the legendary half-white, half-Comanche leader of the Quahati Band, the last free Comanche group, surrendered at Fort Sill, Oklahoma. His capitulation marked the official end of Comanche dominance. As he led his people into confinement, Parker reportedly looked back at the plains and stated, "The white man's road is long before my people." The Comanche, who had ruled the southern plains for over a century, were forced to abandon their traditional territories for government-designated lands, signaling the collapse of an indigenous empire that had once controlled territory larger than many European nations. Land dispossession and lifestyle transformation. The defeat of the Comanche militarily was quickly followed by the physical transformation of their homeland. Palo Duro Canyon, once a natural fortress and winter refuge for Comanche bands during the Red River War, symbolized this rapid change. Just months after Colonel Mackenzie's devastating attack, the canyon and surrounding lands became private property. In 1876, barely a year after the last Comanche surrender, cattle baron Charles Goodnight and his financial partner, John Adair, established the massive J.A. Ranch. In the very canyon where Comanche families had sought shelter, Goodnight's herd of thousands of longhorn cattle now grazed across land where buffalo had roamed only months earlier, marking the beginning of commercial ranching in the former Comancheria. This pattern repeated throughout Texas as the Great Plains underwent a fundamental economic reorganization. The iconic cattle drives of the 1870s moved hundreds of thousands of Texas longhorns northward along routes like the Chisholm Trail, connecting Texas ranches to railheads in Kansas and markets in Chicago. Cowboys, many of whom were Black, Mexican, or mixed-race men, with skills adapted from both vaquero traditions and Plains Indian horsemanship, drove herds across what had recently been Comanche territory. For a brief period, these open-range cattle operations somewhat resembled the nomadic patterns that had preceded them, with animals roaming freely across vast, unfenced spaces. However, this open-range era proved remarkably short-lived. In 1874, the same year the Red River War began, Joseph Glidden patented an improved design for barbed wire that would permanently alter the western landscape. This simple innovation, steel wire twisted with sharp barbs, allowed for cost-effective fencing of enormous properties across treeless plains. Within a decade, barbed wire enclosures spread across Texas at an astonishing rate. The open grasslands that had sustained both buffalo and Comanche mobility were rapidly subdivided into privately owned parcels, marked by fences that couldn't be crossed without trespassing laws being invoked. The federal government's civilization policy created an additional challenge for the displaced Comanche. Government officials and reformers insisted that Plains tribes abandon their hunting-based cultures and adopt sedentary farming. This demand fundamentally misunderstood Plains' cultural values and economic adaptations. For the Comanche, Arapaho, Cheyenne, and Sioux, hunting and warfare formed the core of male identity and social status. Farming was considered women's work in many tribes, and the idea of men tilling soil struck at the heart of their cultural self-conception. As one Comanche leader reportedly told a government agent, "The Great Spirit did not make us to work. He made us to hunt and fish." The conflict between nomadic values and government expectations became especially evident in the allotment era. Under the Jerome Agreement of 1901, which implemented the broader Dawes Act policies, each Comanche individual received 160 acres of land. This policy, designed ostensibly to turn tribal members into self-sufficient farmers, failed to account for several realities. Much of the allotted land was unsuitable for agriculture without modern irrigation. Most Comanche had no desire or training to become farmers, and 160 acres was insufficient for viable cattle ranching in the arid Southwest. Faced with these challenges and immediate economic needs, many Comanche leased or sold their allotments to white settlers, resulting in further land loss. The Comanche did not accept these changes passively. Throughout the 1860s and early 1870s, various bands conducted raids against white settlements, targeting livestock and supply lines. These actions, while often characterized by American authorities as simple depredations, represented deliberate resistance against encroachment. Even after military defeat, Comanche people found ways to maintain aspects of their culture while adapting to new constraints. often traveling between allotments to maintain community connections and conduct traditional ceremonies away from the watchful eyes of government agents. The Medicine Lodge Treaty of 1867 had attempted to confine all Southern Plains tribes to reserved territories in present-day Oklahoma. The Comanche, particularly the Quahati Band led by Quanah Parker, had refused to attend the treaty negotiations and rejected its terms. Their continued resistance until 1875 represented the last major military challenge to American expansion in the Southern Plains. When they finally surrendered at Fort Sill, the Comanche found themselves confined to a reservation alongside former enemies like the Kiowa, further disrupting traditional social patterns and alliances. The final blow to traditional Comanche landholding came through allotment policies that transferred communal tribal lands to individual ownership. This fragmentation of territory, combined with the ecological destruction of the buffalo herds, effectively ended the possibility of returning to traditional lifeways. Within a single generation, the vast territory of Comanche had been completely absorbed into the expanding American nation-state, its resources redistributed, and its landscape transformed to serve an entirely different economic system. The modern Comanche Nation. Unlike many Native American tribes, the Comanche do not possess a concentrated reservation in Oklahoma. Instead, following the 1901 Jerome Agreement, their lands were divided into individual allotments of 160 acres per person, with the surplus open to white settlement. This policy effectively ended communal tribal land ownership and scattered Comanche families across southwestern Oklahoma, creating a distinctly different path toward modern tribal sovereignty. Despite lacking a unified reservation, the Comanche have maintained their identity through the Comanche Nation, headquartered in Lawton, Oklahoma. This self-governing entity operates with substantial autonomy, maintaining its own administrative structure, cultural institutions, and economic enterprises. The Comanche Nation functions as a sovereign entity within the United States, exercising powers of self-government similar to other federally recognized tribes. Like neighboring Oklahoma tribes, such as the Chickasaw and Choctaw, the Comanche operate parallel systems, including tribal police, legislative bodies, and health services. Their population currently numbers between 17,000 and 19,000 enrolled members, with approximately 7,000 living near Lawton, the administrative and cultural center of contemporary Comanche life. Geographic location has significantly influenced economic opportunities. While tribes located near major metropolitan areas like Dallas-Fort Worth have developed substantial gaming operations, the Comanche Nation Casino in Lawton generates important but more modest revenue. The tribe has diversified its economy through cultural tourism and crafts, with events like annual powwows attracting visitors while simultaneously preserving traditions. Oklahoma tribes, including the Comanche, have developed robust self-governance systems, despite lacking the visible geographic footprint of large reservations found in states like South Dakota or Arizona. This progress often occurs without widespread public recognition, as their sovereignty manifests through institutions rather than defined territories. Cultural erosion remains a significant concern. The Comanche language, once spoken throughout the Southern Plains, now has fewer than 100 fluent speakers. Each generation faces increasing pressure from mainstream education and technology that pulls young people away from traditional practices. Yet the tribe maintains strong cultural institutions through events like the Comanche Homecoming in Walters, Oklahoma, and language education programs that work to preserve their unique identity. Historians like S.C. Gwynn, author of Empire of the Summer Moon, documented Comanche history through interviews with 19th-century witnesses conducted in the 1920s and 1930s. Today, the tribe uses modern technology to preserve cultural knowledge, digitizing historical documents and recording traditional practices on the Comanche Nation website. Compared to Plains tribes like the Sioux, who maintain large reservations, such as Pine Ridge. The Comanche have developed an adaptation model based on individually owned land and distributed governance rather than concentrated territory. This approach evolved directly from their unique historical experience with allotment policies. In 2025, the Comanche continue navigating the challenge of balancing economic development with cultural preservation. Their story demonstrates extraordinary cultural persistence in the face of overwhelming change. The people who once commanded an empire of grass now maintain their sovereign identity through institutions, ceremonies, and community bonds that have proved surprisingly durable despite devastating historical losses. The buffalo that once sustained them have returned in small numbers to the plains, just as the Comanche themselves have rebuilt their nation in new forms. Their history reveals how indigenous peoples continue to shape American society long after their military defeat, creating new expressions of sovereignty that defy simple narratives of conquest. Subscribe to Native Legends and History Stories for more authentic accounts of America's indigenous peoples and the complex histories that continue to influence our shared landscape. The stories of nations like the Comanche remind us that American history contains multiple perspectives, each offering vital insights into our collective past.